I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans. And I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers.
That was Langston Hughes. Oh, I've known poets like rivers. Deep, soulful. I'm Frank Crowley, and this is The Art of Poetry. My co-host is Gemma Mathewson, and she's with me by Zoom. There she is. We're still seamlessly together. Isn't that wonderful?
It is.
It is.
Thanks for this opportunity.
Oh, listen, you're it. So, if you wouldn't mind, would you please stand up for a minute for an accolade? Because you are so 60s. Oh.
Frank, I know you like outfits, and so today I wore an outfit that I made myself. I sewed it from Peter Max fabric that I got at my Five and Dime in Clinton.
Whoa! Oh.
1967.
Oh, yeah, it takes my breath away because it's so cleverly done and so Woodstock. That's where we are. Thank you, Gemma. That's marvelous. And you're in the frame, aren't you? You're in the mood. You're in the spirit of the 60s.
I entered the 60s when I was 9, and I left the 60s when I was 19. So it was an important time in my life.
Not only a child of the 60s, but, you've kept the verve. Oh, I'm so glad we're together working on this. And today is the Beats, the 60s. And everything has a context, right? Mm-hmm. So indulge me a minute in my imagination.
Please.
I'm Jack Kerouac, and the Beatniks wore black. Diane DePrima, I saw a picture of her. She's in black. Oh,
indeed.
Gorgeous.
Okay, what you got?
Let's travel back a minute to the start of it all. I'm Kerouac. I'm wasted. I'm really depressed. Kerouac goes on the road. In the fall of 1948, after completing The Town and the City, Jack Kerouac was depressed, angry, and isolated. Quote, "I am lost," he wrote Ginsberg. "The only thing to do is to give up. I'm giving up." Instead, he began a new book. He described it as an American scene picaresque. That means a little bit of this, a little bit of that on the road. On the road, dealing simply with the hitchhiking and the sorrows, hardships, adventures, sweats, and labors of that. At the center would be two boys headed west. Same as two boys heading down the river. We have archetypes in American literature. Let's hear Jack Kerouac. This is much later. He's going to do it.
Empty baseball field. A robin hops along the bench. Blackbird. No! Bluebird! Branch. Still jumping. My rumpled couch, the lady's voice next door. The bottoms of my shoes are clean from walking in the rain. Bee, why are you staring at me? I'm not a flower. The barn swimming in a sea of wind-blown leaves. Glowworm sleeping on this flower. Your light's on. Spring night, a leaf falling from my chimney.
Oh, I'm jazzed up. Are you? Oh, that was marvelous. Were you ever a flower child, Gemma?
Oh, well, I was what I considered a flower child. I lived at home, but I was a flower child when I walked to the Green in New Haven and hiked there for a while. And that reading reminded me of the Exit Coffee House in the late 60s. It was in Haven, in the basement of one of the churches there, I think the Congregational Church, but it was called the Exit Coffee House. And people did read their poetry to riffs of jazz accompaniment. And that was so representative of the kind of poetry that I heard and first recited when I got to New Haven. That was very neat.
Thank you. Thank you for that memory. I missed that, in the 60s completely. You were the genuine flower child. Are you still a flower child?
I still hold to many of the causes of the 60s, civil rights, the banning of homophobia, the environmental concerns, they all started in the 60s. So even gun legislation, there were quite a few poems about things like that in the 60s, and the music was full of those kinds of considerations. So yeah, there's some things I hold dear and some things I've moved on from.
Exactly. And you're like Mrs. Haiku. You really are into haiku. You've got haiku writing friends. My sister is the haiku queen. She's the one who belongs to the Haiku Society. I remember her well because the three of us had a blast about 3 years ago here on the same studio. Thank you, Gemma. That is so redolent of the 60s. And so the context is important. Kerouac can say, before me, there was Allen Ginsberg. And that's true. Allen, this is the first few lines of Howl, 1955, October 13, San Francisco, blew the audience away, blew the San Francisco Renaissance away when it kicked it off, which is really the starting date. Howl. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn, looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters, burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night. End quote. Ginsberg read on to the end of the poem, which left us standing in wonder, or cheering and wondering, but knowing at the deepest level that a barrier had been broken, that a human voice and body had been hurled against the harsh wall of America and its supporting armies and navies and academies and institutions and ownership systems and power support bases. Yeah, the fat cats, they're still here. They're still pulling the strings. We're the puppets. Exactly. Oh. And then there's number 3. We're talking about the big names of the beats. Mm-hmm. Really beat Burroughs. Burroughs is so whacked out. I mean, he is Pluto, or rather the far asteroid that circles this solar system of great lights and beats. He is the asymptotic curve on the mathematical scale. And yet somehow he's at the center of it all. Mm-hmm. My goodness, John. Oh, Burroughs. Wow.
Can I just insert this very quick poem about Burroughs' work from Allen Ginsberg's Reality Sandwiches?
Reality Sandwiches.
Absolutely, on Burroughs' work. The method must be purest meat and no symbolic dressing. Actual visions and actual prisons as seen then and now. Prisons and visions represented with rare descriptions corresponding exactly to those of Alcatraz and Rose. A naked lunch is natural to us. We eat reality sandwiches, but allegories are so much lettuce. Don't hide the madness, Mr. Burroughs. And that is what Allen Ginsberg wrote.
Allegories are lettuce.
Put that in there.
Come on. Allegories
are so much lettuce, right?
So we're ready for Allen's voice. Get ready. I'm going to love this voice.
The poem is A Supermarket in California, published in the book Howl, put out by the City Lights Company in San Francisco. The title is A Supermarket in California. The author, Allen Ginsberg. What thoughts I have of you tonight, Walt Whitman. For I walk down the side streets under the trees with a headache, self-conscious, looking at the full moon. In my hungry fatigue and shopping for images, I went into the neon fruit supermarket dreaming of your enumerations. What peaches and what penumbras, whole families shopping at night, aisles full of husbands, wives in the avocados, babies in the tomatoes, and you, Garcia Lorca, what were you doing down by the watermelons? I saw you, Walt Whitman, childless, lonely old grubber, poking among the meats in the refrigerator and eyeing the grocery boys. I heard you asking questions of each. Who killed the pork chops? What price bananas? Are you my angel? I wandered in and out of the brilliant stacks of cans following you and followed in my imagination by the store detective. We strode down the open corridors together in our solitary fancy, tasting artichokes, possessing every frozen delicacy, and never passing the cashier. Where are we going, Walt Whitman? The doors close in an hour. Which way does your beard point tonight? I touch your book and dream of our odyssey in the supermarket and feel absurd. Will we walk all night through solitary streets? The trees add shade to shade, lights out in the houses. We'll both be lonely. Will we stroll dreaming of the lost America of love, past blue automobiles in driveways, home to our silent cottage as in Camden once? Ah, dear father, graybeard, lonely old courage teacher, what America did you have when Sharon quit poling his ferry and you got out on a smoking bank and stood watching the boat disappear on the black waters of Lethe?
Oh, that's got it, doesn't it? It's got it all. There's some side references that are important. Garcia Lorca, the wonderful Spanish poet who was killed by the rightists. He did New York. Oh, yeah. And Whitman, old graybeard, father of us all. He's, of course, the traditional line. And what else strikes you, Gemma, about the imagery? Somebody's in the pork chops?
Yeah, I love the imagery. What could be more mundane than supermarket shopping, bringing you into the reality of everyday life, and then going off into the evocation of all his, not all, but some of his most important, famous references that he brings into the reality that he's experiencing. And, you know, having a playful fantasy about the mundane, which I seem to recall he did quite a bit.
Quite a bit. What an imagist.
Yeah.
Going back to HD and Pound imagism in the 20s. I mean, he's steeped in our poetic traditions. What about Charon crossing the river Styx to the dead, the land of the dead? And yet, meanwhile, he's got a lecherous eye out for the grocery boy down at one of the ends of the aisles, you know, and that's why he evokes Whitman, homosexual, gay, culture, celebration, and also...
I think, coming into the 60s, he brings that forward. Whitman didn't bring it forward, and he brings it forward, and today it's celebrated, which is, the natural progression of LBGTQ. So I think that's just perfect that he is that link, or one of the many link points, and how he does that. But I remember hearing, from family and other media, that he was a commie, that he was, queer or whatever. And, that was also part of his, at the time, how he was seen.
And that brings us to beat. What does beat mean anyway? Where did it come from? Wow. Hunky, one of the hangers-on, the second stream, we talked about the first stream of writers. Well, they were all their acolytes and hangers-on, thieves, knaves. Wow. And the underbelly of the arts world, the bohemian fullness of counterculture, they're celebrated as turn it upside down, folks, turn the 50s upside down. You're going to get the 60s. Wow. So Whitman, celebrating gay liberation in his poetry.
Absolutely.
Unabashedly, but he had to change some pronouns sometimes. That's awful to get published. And then here we are, Garcia Lorca, and then Ginsberg and the rest. But beat. Who came up with Hunky says it's a beatific thing. It's spiritual, man. Don't you get it? It's beatific. We have a vision. And it's the opposite, the obverse of what America's practicing in its mainstream culture now. Let's give it a kick. Let's leave the country for a while. Go to Tunisia. Yeah, the reefers in Tunisia. Let's go to India, an ashram, sweat. Let's get rid of this toxic culture that's we're imbued with, came in with mother's milk. Oh, what are we going to do? Besides take peyote and hitchhike back from Mexico City, says Kerouac.
Well, it was a time when people started, or it became more prevalent for people to explore how to have an elevated sense of awareness. And unfortunately, drugs played a bigger part in that than was good for a lot of people. But there were many other things being explored too, as you say, Eastern religion and culture, and quite a few other things. Environmentalism, getting back to nature, that was also a big exploration that started in the 60s. So.
What a reawakening, what an American Renaissance. In many ways, Gary Snyder says, I'm going off to Japan for 20 years, to write poetry. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Speaking of I do this, I do that, that's Frank O'Hara. Yeah, Frank O'Hara, the New York poet, he's in the same tradition, right?
You got it. And you have one to read, and then you want me to read one, is that correct?
Yeah, how about you read Frank O'Hara, the one you got in front of you?
Okay. July is over, and there's very little trace.
Yeah.
July is over, and there's very little trace of it, though the Bastille fell on its face. And August's gotten orange. It will drop on the edge of the world like a worm-eaten sun. The trees are taking off their leaves, so the purity of the streets is coming low in white waves. In the summer, I got good and sunburnt winter, so I wouldn't miss the wet brunt of your storms. Then it was sand from the surf in my bathing trunks. Now, snow fills up my scarf.
Ha! Snow fills up my scarf. Well, we're going to go take a break, and we'll come back with Frank O'Hara Part 2. So thank you for joining us, and we'll be right back.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans, and soon they will be available to everyone.
This vaccine means hope. It will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
I want to go back to work, and I want to be able to move around.
To visit with Michelle's mom, to hug her and see her on her birthday.
I'm really looking forward to is going to opening day in Texas Ranger Stadium with a full stadium.
We've lost enough people, and we've suffered enough damage.
In order to get rid of this pandemic, it's important for our fellow citizens to get vaccinated.
I'm getting vaccinated because we want this pandemic to end as soon as possible.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
So roll up your sleeve and do your part.
This is our shot. Now it's up to you.
Get it. Get it.
Get it.
Get it. Get it.
Get it. Get it.
Is she gonna get it, Daddy?
She'll get it.
Get it. Get it.
When you bring home a Goodwill find, you give your whole town a reason to celebrate because you're also funding local job training and placement programs in tech, healthcare, and more. Goodwill. Bring good home.
Smart TVs and streaming services have taken over the television industry. VSC TV is proud to announce our presence on Apple TV and Roku to make watching your favorite shows even easier. You can access this service by downloading the Cablecast ScreenWeave app. Then choose Valley Shore Community TV from the list of channels. Select VSC TV Live to watch our channel in full HD. Or pick a show from our on-demand video library. VSC TV is your local Connecticut Mid-Shore Valley digital connection.
Here we're back, and we're ready to go with Frank O'Hara's words himself. That's best. Here we go. Come on, Frank. Let us have your voice. Oh, yeah.
The next poem is called Poem 2. Lana Turner has collapsed. I was trotting along and suddenly it started raining and snowing, and you said it was hailing, but hailing hits you on the head hard, so it was really snowing and raining. And I was in such a hurry to meet you, but the traffic was acting exactly like the sky. And suddenly I see a headline, Lana Turner has collapsed. There is no snow in Hollywood. There is no rain in California. I have been to lots of parties and acted perfectly disgraceful, but I never actually collapsed. Oh, Lana Turner, we love you. Get up.
Hey, Hollywood icon. Lana Turner. Do you remember Lana Turner's films?
Not so much.
No, not so much. Maybe before your time.
Yes. But that's a segue to the films I do remember. One of the films that was really front and center for me in the 60s was, oh my gosh. This was the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
And it was written by Ken Kesey. And Ken Kesey, in an interview with the beat writers at work from the Paris Review, they asked him about who was the supposed villain, was Nurse Ratched. And she was called Big Nurse. She was a nurse in a facility for the mentally disturbed, and she ran with an iron fist. And so they asked Ken Kesey if they thought she was the villain of his story. And he says this, and this is so 60s, I wanted to read it.
Oh, good.
The thing that changes as you get older is your belief that certain people are bad forever or good forever. We're not. It wouldn't make any sense to write if we were. With blame, you either resist it or you pick up rocks and throw them at who's to blame. Wendell Berry talks about rocks and throwing them at who's to blame. And he says we all have the capacity to do evil, but we have to learn to forbear it. What keeps us from being monsters are Emerson and Thoreau and the Beatles and Bob Dylan, great artists who teach us to love and hold off the hurt. The hurt is inside us, and of course, we can always randomly hurt something, but a great artist will teach you to love a thing and not to want to possess it or alter it, just to love it. You finally have to love Big Nurse. So I thought that was really an essence of the message of the 60s. So I wanted to read that. And of course, Ken Kesey was one of the Merry Pranksters.
Oh, he was.
Yeah.
And that's a subset, isn't it, of the wonderful Veets. So they spun off so many. Yeah, Ratchet rhymes with hatchet. And so many symbolic names come through fiction. But what a wonderful wake-up call that movie was for me, too. You know, the nature of gratuitous love, I mean, that's what Flower Power was. It was love. And that's what Ginsberg was prophesizing and also promoting. The opposite, it seems, of the commercial culture that was ascendant at the time. Good old Frank, you know, I read his book, and it's like he bears it all. In fact, there he is in the nude, you know, on the cover of his book. Frank, I do this, I do that. Everybody's labeled him as a kind of quotidian guy. I do this, I do that. I go to the MoMA Museum and I curate and I buy paintings and you know, what a style. Almost proletarian, right? But he's got other sides, as most poets do. Mayakovsky. Who the heck was Mayakovsky? Well, the crazy, crazy Russian poet in the 30s and 40s who committed suicide under Stalin's cloud. Mayakovsky was a free spirit, like Frank. My heart's aflutter. I am standing in the bathtub crying, Mother, Mother, who am I? If he will just come back once and kiss me on the face, his coarse hair brush my temple, it's throbbing, then I guess I can put on my clothes, I guess, and walk the streets. I love you, but I'm turning to my verses, and my heart is closing like a fist. Words. Be sick as I am sick. Swoon, roll back your eyes. A pool, and I'll stare down at my wounded beauty, which at best is only a talent for poetry. Cannot please, cannot charm or win. What a poet! And the clear water is thick with bloody blows on the head. I embraced a cloud, but when I soared, it rained. That's funny. There's blood on my chest. Oh, yes, I've been carrying bricks. What a funny place to rupture. And now it is raining on the ailanthus as I step out onto the window ledge. The tracks below me are smoky and glistening with a passion for running. I leap into the leaves, green like the sea. Now I am quietly waiting for the catastrophe of my personality to seem beautiful again, and interesting, and modern. The country is gray and brown and white in trees, snows, and skies of laughter, always diminishing, less funny, not just darker, not just gray. It may be the coldest day of the year. What does he think of that? I mean, what do I? And if I do, perhaps I am myself again. Wow, he crawled into Mayakovsky's skin as Mayakovsky was going to jump off the ledge, but that's not how he died. He shot himself. Mayakovsky under the pressure of Stalin. Oh, is it ever thus with poets under oppressive regime?
There are still poets who are being oppressed. Vara Rao in India was recently jailed during the COVID. He's 81 years old, and he's been jailed in India. And he got COVID, and he had a fundraiser of poets doing work to get him released, which he is now in house arrest. I was one of the poets, so that's how I'm aware of it.
Tell me more of that.
It was an international group of poets from India, England, Ireland, Israel, and I believe Japan are some of the countries poets contributed to his book with his own poems in it. He's been a famous poet in India, he's a representative of the Telugu people, which are the people of his culture within India. And the book is called The Silence of Fireflies, after one of his poems. And it was just released recently internationally, although I have no way of getting it so far. We'll keep you posted.
And you're in it.
Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful. Oh, my God. Activism. Yeah.
But it's still happening to poets. Poets are still, especially poets who speak truth to power.
Especially poets who speak truth to power.
Because we're still talking about those things they were talking about in the 60s. Nuclear war, nuclear waste, civil rights, environment.
The issues are the same, and environment especially. Isn't that the truth? Finally the world is coming around to, oh my God, the oceans are polluted. What else about that experience really moved you? You were moved to and motivated to contribute, and under those circumstances, it's representative, it's emblematic of all the quiet poets who are sitting pretty much around the world in repressive regimes waiting to express themselves creatively. Very representative. I think even now, we're in an ivory tower in America, of course.
Yeah.
There's a First Amendment, so to speak.
Yeah, well, some of us are.
Some of us are, yeah. Mm-hmm. How about the unknowns and forgotten? And what did the other poets say about that? How about Denise? You got Denise for us?
Something from Denise. This is dedicated to Karen Silkwood.
Wow.
Who was a chemist, and she worked in a nuclear power plant, and she found out that she had severe contamination. Mm-hmm. And when she tried to bring it forth to Congress, somehow mysteriously her car got run off the road and she was killed.
Oh yeah.
Then, this is Denise Levertov's poem dedicated to her.
Denise Levertov. So she's 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, but we have only, first there's an epigram and it's not credited.
Oh.
From too much love of living, hope and desire set free, even the weariest river winds somewhere to the sea. That's the epigram, and this is her poem. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy, only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with beast and flower, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being, the river again.
Yeah.
Surely it cannot drag in silt all that is innocent. Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that can be mended, that must be mended. Too much hurt we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we could join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in bud. And it was in bud in the 60s, and hopefully we're helping to open it now.
I love that poem, Gemma. I've never heard it before.
It's called Beginners. Beginners.
Beginners. So much is in bud. And thematically, how the river of life weaves into this show, and also thematically, in terms of archetypal journeys, we're all on a journey down the river into the great ocean. I mean, it has so many emblematic and metaphoric images to go with it. I loved that poem. Could you read that poem again, please?
Sure. I've loved it at some point, so I'll try to read it better this time. Beginners. From too much love of living, hope and desire set free, even the weariest river winds somewhere to the sea. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy, only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with beast and flower, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended, too much hurt we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in bud.
Thank you again. So much is in bud. There's so much hope still, and yet, what a picture. It's as if we live with blinders on, right?
Yeah, we're not siblings of beast and
no.
Villains of monsters, you know? No? Exactly.
She imprecates us to take the blinders off, join with our fellows around the world, all the human nations. Wonderful poem. Do you have anything else from her?
No, I don't right now.
Do you know any?
We could revisit her later, though. I would love to do that.
Oh, yeah. Have you read about her life at all? Do you know much about her?
No. Tell us, please.
No, I'm dying to know because I missed her so completely, and I'm heartbroken because that poem is like the paragon of poems for today.
Okay. Frank, I'm on it.
It's just so moving and powerful, and so much a statement of the 60s as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah.
Wow. So I had, both tears and joy in that poem because it's like everything's so sad all over again. The 2020s are again reliving the 60s and the struggles. Wow. So the river winds it up for us beautifully. But let's dive back into any of the greats of the beats, the beatific, to see what else is speaking to us. Do you have any other poems sitting around from?
Gosh, let me see. Don't know that I looked anything else up this time around.
Okay.
You know what? I do have a Diane Wilkowski.
Okay, hold that a minute. We're going to go to another voice who is a more personal voice. Robert Hayden is an African-American poet whom we've celebrated. We opened the show with Langston Hughes, and now we have another African-American poet. This is my favorite poem of his, and it's so heartwarming and heart-wrenching at the same time. So let's wrap up the section with Hayden.
Here is a poem that comes directly out of my boyhood in Detroit. It's called Those Winter Sundays. Sundays, too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made bank fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the coal splintering breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the coal, and polish my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices?
What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? Oh, so penetrating about a father's love and remembrance and a child's insouciance and lighthearted taking it all for granted. That poem sort of like put a brand on my heart.
It's a universal thing when you realize what your parents have done for you and you didn't really even know, what it cost them.
What it cost them. And of course, Kerouac went after his first flush of fame after On the Road. I mean, it was almost instantaneous and almost overwhelming. So he got through the 4 to 5, 6 weeks of fame in an alcoholic stupor because he couldn't handle it. He had the opposite reaction of, those 15-minute of famers. Mm-hmm. He was overwhelmed. He went scurrying back to his mom, and she took care of him. And here's Fearless Jack, on the road with Neil Cassidy going on the archetypal journey across country or down the river, doesn't matter. Yeah.
That was clever.
From Michael McClure, he was the really good-looking guy of the second string of well-known San Francisco Renaissance poets. 3 years before the peyote experience just described, I had given my first poetry reading with Allen Ginsberg, the Zen poet Philip Whalen, Gary Snyder, and the American Surrealist poet Philip Lamantia. The reading was in October 1955 at the Six Gallery in San Francisco. The Six Gallery was a cooperative art gallery run by young artists who centered around the San Francisco Art Institute. They were fiery artists who had either studied with Clifford Still and Martha Rothko or the newly emerging figurative painters. Their works range from huge drip and slash to minute precision smudges turning into faces. Nice analogy with the Pollock style and the Beat style of words. Earlier in the year, poet Robert Duncan, he was more of a grandfather from North Carolina, had given a staged reading of his play. But on this night, Kenneth Rexroth was master of ceremonies. This was the first time that Allen Ginsberg read Howl. Though I had known Allen for some months preceding, it was my first meeting with Gary Snyder and Philip Whalen. Lamantia did not read his poetry that night. The world that we tremblingly stepped into in that decade was a bitter gray one. But San Francisco was a special place. 1955. Rexroth said it was to the arts what Barcelona was to Spanish anarchism. Still, there was no way, even in San Francisco, to escape the pressures of the war culture. We were locked in the Cold War and the first Asian debacle, the Korean War. My self-image in those years was of finding myself young, high, a little crazed, needing a haircut, in an elevator with burly, crew-cutted, square-jawed eminences staring at me like I was misplaced cannon fodder. Ooh, misplaced cannon fodder. The contrast couldn't be more extreme. So, to tie it back to T.S. Eliot and The Wasteland, truly, a lot of poets in the 60s looked at Howell and saw Eliot's Wasteland echoing. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked. What a throwback. The Wasteland, which was the seminal poem of that generation.
Well, that's what the 60s started out to be, as a protest against the wasteland, the wasteland that was the 50s.
Right on, Gemma. Right on. We got 3 minutes. So what are your feelings about having lived through this show?
It was a very interesting show. I liked the variety that was presented, and I learned a lot from you, Frank. So I feel it was a very good show. Thank you for having
Ditto. Back at you. And you're the last word. So you have a few lines from that poem you were pulling up?
Oh, sure.
What a great coda. What a way to end it.
The Buddha learns to work a radial arm saw on his birthday. It's easier to burn than to build. Thousands of fireflies put into a tank, a bottle, glow brightly. With enough light to light the whole garage, cause no rise in temperature. They are the only known cold light. This I saw with my own eyes. Fireflies glowing in the dark without burning. I am learning that you can build anything, it is true, with all of your power tools. You can make the city run. Do not confuse burning with making light, or building with the tools that do it. So there's a twist on environmentalism and where power comes from and what power can be used for.
It sure is. That nails the environment to the wall. The cold light of fireflies. And wasn't your poem about fireflies?
Oh, I do have a poem about fireflies. Yeah. We'll revisit that another day. I don't think I can find it right now.
You can't fire up to the fireflies. No. Why don't we start with that next time? I would love. What a wonderful segue. Fireflies.
Okay,
yeah.
Because they're coming.
They're coming. And, what a wonderful thing if the world during the evening saw all these fireflies gathering, a.k.a. poets, protesters, the rest. The blinders are off. So where do we go from here? Politically and socially. I am tempted to put the blinders back on, because I'm a little afraid.
No, Frank, don't do it.
I won't. But I'll keep them just in case because, I'm 79. I'm feeling like, I need some emotional nurturance from my family and my friends. I'm just coming out of chrysalis and hibernation. I've been so isolated for a year and 12 months. I want to hold the world at bay a little bit because I can't stand the news at 6. Are you feeling any of that?
Sure.
Yeah.
But we can do a show on emotional nurturance if you want. We'll
next time. Yeah, let's find the emotional nurturers.
We'll bring some poets to help us.
Thank you, Gemma. It's a wrap, and I got to go home and go to bed because emotionally this was so draining for me. Next time, I'll come back with more energy. Thanks, Gemma. You're the best. Oh, my 60s pal.